Axis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., reminding you that to keep abreast of world events, Tarpley.net is the ticket. The new, improved, upgraded Tarpley.net with frequent new contributions. Most recently, the call from Birgitte Jonsdottir of Iceland, a call for support from the peoples of the world for Iceland in its life and death struggle with the financier oligarchs, the International Monetary Fund, the organ of the world banking community, also the British government, the Dutch government, Anglo-Dutch finance capital, and indeed the European Union of the Portuguese fascist Barroso, all of them in the service of the banks of the City of London and Amsterdam. And this is about 400 years of banking domination between those two. We're trying to call on all forces of goodwill, leftists, of course, in particular, people who have read that Matt Taibbi article in Rolling Stone and understood the unfathomable evil of Goldman Sachs. And again, don't forget J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, Bank of New York, Mellon, Wells Fargo, and a few others. But in particular, focusing now on the need for a march on Wall Street. Enough with the marches on Washington. That's been done to death. That point has been made. Let's get the march on Goldman Sachs. There was indeed a low-level march on Goldman Sachs back in September. The Stella d'Oro bakery workers from the Bronx, I believe, did something vis-a-vis Goldman Sachs. But now it's time for something to make this point. And the atmospherics are going to be a cascade of unbelievable greed in the form of the bonuses of the various financial institutions that have all been bailed out by you, the patsy fall guy who pays taxes to this regime. And again, the problem with the regime is it's a banker's regime. Federal government could be, and indeed has been in the past, a powerful tool against the banks. And that's what we want to look into now. What are the chances of doing that? Tea Party people, if you think you're going to take some power in Washington, the only way you'll succeed in doing what you really want to do is if you break the power of Wall Street over Washington. That is the heart of your problem. The problem with Washington is that Wall Street runs it. Tiny Tim Geithner has got a cell phone in which he's got pre-programmed the speed dial sector, Pandit the Bandit of Citibank, Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase, and Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs. And I'm just wondering, what do you think that phone is used for? Is it Geithner who gives orders to Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and Citibank? Or isn't it J.P. Morgan, Citibank, and Goldman Sachs who give orders to Geithner? It's certainly Geithner who's getting the orders, carrying them out, a running dog, a stooge for Wall Street. So get those power relations straight. Now, in the case of AIG, they were given, and the initial tranche is about $180 billion, I think. So what did they do with that money? They paid private banks for derivatives. Now, we've always stressed, derivatives are the cause and the center of this depression, the $1.5 quadrillion derivatives bubble worldwide. And that is most acutely expressed in this AIG hedge fund with its $3 trillion of toxic, worthless junk derivatives. So the money was given to AIG. The money goes from Paulson at the Treasury with supervision from Bernanke at the Fed, with help, above all, from Tiny Tim Geithner, at that time running the New York branch of the Federal Reserve down there in Maiden Lane near Wall Street. So what is done with the money? That money is then given to AIG. AIG at this point is under the control of Ed Liddy, a veteran of Goldman Sachs. Oh, my God, that constant pedigree that comes back to haunt us. So what is done by AIG with the money? Well, first of all, they give $13 billion to Goldman Sachs. They pay off the AIG derivatives at 100 cents on the dollar, full value. There was no market in the world where that could have been obtained. So if you love the free market, you've got to be against this one. This was a violation of the free market. Yes, indeed. Of course, there is no free market, so we better not use that term too much, lest we foment illusions and delusions. You can put the free market over there with the Tooth Fairy and the rest of them. Goldman Sachs got $13 billion, full payment. Merrill Lynch got $7 billion. Merrill Lynch, of course, was in the process of being absorbed. They were going out of business and then were absorbed by Bank of America. Bank of America directly got $5.2 billion. Citibank got $2.3 billion, And Wachovia, another one that was in the process of going down, they're going to be absorbed by Wells Fargo, $1.5 billion. So U.S. banks directly from AIG got $29 billion for derivatives, credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations, and the rest of them. But that's not all. Then came the foreign banks, and this is where the indignation should be rising to the level of a fast rolling boil. Société Générale of France, remember, there was a rumor that they had gone bankrupt back in January of 2008, big European stock market panic in the January of 2008 around Société Générale. Of course, they were bankrupt. They got $12 billion. So a French bank gets $12 billion from the U.S. Treasury and the New York Fed. Taxpayer money, not even Fed money, taxpayer money directly. The assumption is that some of that money then goes back to Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan or some other Morgan or some other Wall Street. But nevertheless, the first recipient, Société Générale of France, gets $12 billion. Not to be outdone, Deutsche Bank of Germany gets $12 billion. Two foreign banks, French bank, German bank. Barclays Bank of Great Britain gets $8.5 billion. Union Bank of Switzerland, UBS, gets $5 billion. So this is even more. This is $38 billion to foreign banks. $29 billion to the Wall Street gang, $38 billion to foreign derivatives bankers. All right. So this became known in the spring of 2009, but we're now back in November, December of 2008. At this point, AIG is required under the Securities Act of 1933 to make a filing, I think it's called Schedule A, in which they detail precisely these payments. This is obligatory by law. This is a compulsory process of reporting these things under the securities law. So AIG sends a draft to Geithner's New York Fed saying, here's what we're going to report to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And, of course, most of these filings then become public within a short period of time. Geithner's New York Fed, through various stooges, lawyers, and other agents of Geithner, write back to AIG saying, don't do it, conceal it, commit a federal crime under the Securities Act of 1933 by hiding the amount you've paid to Wall Street and to these foreign banks, a total of $67 billion. This is not chump change. This is not chicken feed. This is not peanuts. This is big bucks. Geithner's New York Fed is therefore implicated up to his eyebrows in a conspiracy to violate the Securities Act of 1933. We demand a special prosecutor to investigate Geithner and put him in jail along with other New York Fed officials, and Bernanke and Cohn of the Central Federal Reserve, who must have known about this. Back in a minute.